Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 27th of February. So coming to the first article, stemming the tide of agrarian distress. Now as obvious, the context is the agricultural distress, but this has been discussed vis-a-vis the budget of 2018 and 19. Now before we begin, you need to understand that the Prime Minister himself has noted that there is an aim of the government and the aim is to double the farmers' income by 2022. And in that context, the entire issue of agricultural distress becomes very, very important for us. This is an important topic under the General Studies paper 3. And for that reason, this will be the major part of our discussion today. So let's begin the discussion. Coming to the issues, the first issue is with regards to the pro-agriculture budget. Now this budget of 2018 and 19 has been a pro-agriculture budget. This is largely because of two reasons. The first is that genuinely there is a challenge which the agriculture sector is facing. There is huge agricultural distress in the country, and for that reason the budget has focused on agriculture. That is the first reason. The second reason is that this is the last full budget of the government, and you need to know that approximately 58% of India's population is still involved in agriculture. So no democratically elected government can ignore agriculture, and as a result of which the budget is a pro-agriculture budget. So that becomes important. The second issue is with regards to the increased MSP. Now the budget has increased the minimum support prices to more than 50% of the cost of production, which means that whatever is the cost of production, at least the minimum support price is going to be 50% more than that cost of production. So that is something that you need to know. This is one aspect. Also, the minimum support prices has now been extended to the Kharif crops also. This 50% norm was initially all available for the Rabi crops only, and now it will also include the Kharif crops. So this is something that becomes important here. Another important analysis which has been given is with regards to the cost of production. Now, as I told you, the MSP will be 50% more than what the farmer has incurred as a cost of production. So how is this cost of production analyzed? First and foremost, you need to know that this is basically done by the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices. So this is a PT question also. Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices is the institution that calculates the cost of production, and it advises the government about the minimum support prices. But this is only an advice, and this is not something that is binding on the government. So this is one analysis that you need to know. Now, what are the types of cost of production? There are three types of cost of production. The first is the A2 type. In the A2 type, what is analyzed is that all the paid expenses, including the cash as well as in-kind expenses which a farmer has incurred for growing a particular crop, is what is analyzed here under the A2 part. The second cost of production includes this A2, that is all the cost that the farmer has paid for growing a particular crop, plus this also includes the family labor component. So this is something that is important. And the third type of cost of production is the C2 type, and in this what is included is A2FL, which means that it includes all the incurred costs, it includes the family labor, but it also includes the rents that are paid and the interest that a farmer is paying. So the issue here is, the controversy is that at present the government considers the A2 plus FL as the cost of production, but the farmers are saying that because they are now paying high interest rates and also high rents is what they are paying, so the government should consider C2. So that becomes important. If the government is going to accept this demand of the farmers, then the burden on the exchequer is going to increase, because in the direct proportion, minimum support prices is going to increase. So that is some analysis which is important here. Another issue with regards to agriculture sector is the high input costs in agriculture sector, and this input cost is largely high because of the fertilizers. Now here you need to know that fertilizers is a controlled sector. The government gives a subsidy to the fertilizer manufacturer, who then gives the fertilizer to the farmer. Now what has happened because of this regulation in this sector is that there is no competition, and this sector is highly inefficient. Because of this inefficiency, the cost of fertilizers has increased, and this is resulting in a high input cost of agriculture, and this is something that is impacting the profits of the farmers, and that is one analysis which is important for us. Another thing is the issue of price volatility. Now this is one of the major challenges that Indian agriculturists or the farmers are facing, that there is a huge amount of price volatility. Sometimes the price rise exorbitantly, and sometimes they fall without any match. For example, recently we have seen that potatoes in Uttar Pradesh, or for that matter, sometimes we see tomatoes or red chilies or the tur dal. So all of these crops are sometimes they face severe fall in prices. So this price volatility is the biggest challenge to the income of the farmer. Now, why is this price volatility there? There are some issues related to this. The primary issue is with regards to the Agricultural Price Marketing Committee. Now, this is the first, you need to know some understanding with regards to this particular act is that the farmers cannot sell their products in an open market. The first sale that a farmer makes has to be made in an agricultural produce market under the APMC Act. And this is something that results in problems of cartelization. It results in exploitation of the farmer because the farmer is not free to trade his produce. And that is a major reason because of which the farmer is not getting an ideal remuneration for him. So that is one biggest challenge to the agriculture sector. And that is something that even the government is looking into. The e-NAM project of the government is in this context where the electronic national agriculture market is something that the government is planning to set up so that the farmers can connect directly with the buyers and the middlemen are removed. So that is something that the government is envisaging. Another thing that is important with regards to the price volatility is that the infrastructure is weak. For example, tomatoes and potatoes, these are perishable crops. So if there is a bumper crop in a particular year, what is needed is that there should be adequate infrastructure for cold storages so that the crop can be adequately used and it shouldn't go waste. So that is something that becomes important with regards to the price volatility. Indeed, this is one of the major causes for agricultural distress, and this is an important analysis. Another issue is with regards to the price deficient payment scheme. Now, this is something that is again very, very important. This is a good idea which you should replicate in your answers. Now you have to understand that despite the fact that the government continues to raise the MSP, the government does not focus on the infrastructure aspect. That means if the government is going to procure more and more from the farmers, then definitely it will require to store those crops at a particular storage structure. Not only that, even the PDS system in the country is weak. It is known for leakages. So as a result of this, the entire success of this project beginning from MSPs to finally distribution of the collected food grains to the public is something that is a weak system. So instead of doing this, a new model is what some states have adopted. For example, Haryana has adopted this model for vegetables. Madhya Pradesh has adopted this model as the Bhav Antar Bhugtan Yojana. Now what happens here is that a farmer sells his produce normally in the market, but he only brings a receipt as to what price he has sold his crop, and if the crop has been sold at a price which is lower than the minimum support price, then in that case the difference is what the government pays to the farmer. So this is a good step because in this step what is eliminated is the burden on the government to manage these procured crops, and this is more efficient than the idea of MSP. So that is something that is a good idea, the price deficient payment scheme. So that is something that is important. Please remember the Bhavantar Bhugtan Yojana by Bhavantar Bhugtan Yojana, which is followed by Madhya Pradesh. So this becomes important for us. Another thing which is important is with regards to the 22,000 rural hearts converting into Grameen agriculture markets. This is also something that has been proposed in the budget, and this indeed is a novel idea. 2,000 crore is the sum that the budget has allocated for agriculture market infrastructure. Now, I have told you that the agricultural markets is the weakest link in agriculture. It is a challenge of the supply chain of agriculture, and to correct this, what is now being ensured is that more and more markets is what is going to be set up. At present, the markets at which the farmers can sell their produce are limited, and as a result of which the farmers generally don't come to these markets themselves. Rather, they sell their produce at a very low cost to traders who come to these mandis to sell the farm produce, and this is a major cause of distress to the farmers. If there will be more and more markets within the villages themselves, then it will help and will enable the farmers to sell their produce themselves, and it will remove the middlemen. So that is something that is important here. Another thing which is important is with regards to investment in agriculture sector. Now you need to understand that time and again MSP has been criticized as a political tool, and it is said that this is not done as an economic it does not consider the economic viability, and this is a criticism which comes with regards to the investment. Now what happens is the government spends a large section of the agricultural budget on MSPs, and as a result of which what is suffering is investment in agriculture sector, which is much warranted. First and foremost, investment should be made in the irrigation sector. Also, investments need to be made with regards to making agriculture sector more capital intensive by assuring that large farms are something that are pooled in from farmers, and more mechanization in agriculture is something that is induced. So this is something that is vital, which is not taking place in the country, and this is one of the primary causes for agricultural distress. So this becomes important for us. Another issue that is important is with regards to the Operation Green. This Operation Green has again been mooted in the budget itself. Now, what is this Operation Green is? This Operation Green is on the similar lines to Operation Flood, and it is largely going to focus on the price volatility in the perishable goods. Primarily, these perishable goods are three crops, that is potato, tomato and onions. So that is something that becomes important for us, because these three crops, potato, tomato and onion, are the basic crops in the food basket of any family. So it is to be ensured that at least there should be some price stability in these three crops, and for this Operation Green is what has been established, and a sum of 500 crore is what has been set aside for Operation Green. That is important for us to know. Another thing which is very, very important this year is going to be the Agricultural Produce and Livestock Market Committee Act 2017. Now, as I mentioned, the primary problem with agriculture sector is the APMC Act. Now, it is each state which has its own APMC Act, because agriculture is a state subject. However, what you need to know is that time and again the central government provides with a model act for the state governments to emulate, to follow. And now in the year 2017, precisely in April 2017, the government came up with a newer model act, which was known as the Agricultural Produce and Livestock Market Committee Act. And this is a landmark act because it has several changes from the previous act. It calls for creating more and more markets to create more competition and do away with the monopoly of the APMC, because as I told you previously, farmers could only sell their produce at the first sale of any agricultural produce could take place in an APMC market only. Now this is something that is going to be changed. Private sector has been invited to form more and more agricultural markets, and this monopoly is something that is going to be done away with. So this becomes important for us. Another thing which is important is with regards to the institutional credit. Now institutional credit is something that is much warranted in the agriculture sector, and indeed it has increased. For example, in the year 1999 to 2000, institutional credit to the farmers constituted only 10%. However, this has now increased to 41%, and this is something that is a major achievement. So this is something that is important. Another thing is that the budget has also said that at present the institutional credit is 10 lakh crore and it wants to increase it to 11 lakh crore. So this becomes important. But one thing that is important with regards to institutional credit is that credit becomes important if the farmers are going to use this credit primarily for investment in agriculture. At present, what is being seen is that farmers are taking this credit and they are not using it for adequate investment in agriculture itself, and that is a cause of concern. And often there is also loan waivers by the political parties at the times of elections. So what happens is that some ethical credit practices is something that is not developing in the farm sector, and this is another major concern with regards to the agriculture sector. So that becomes important for us. Another issue is with regards to irrigation. Now here you need to know that in India, 52% of the net sown area is still unirrigated and it is rain fed, and this is taking place in the backdrop of climate change, which is troubled by frequent floods and droughts, and as a result of which irrigation has become a major cause of agricultural distress. So that becomes important. Some schemes, what you should know: the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which has an ambition of Har Khet Ko Pani. So that becomes important. Few days back we had discussed about the solar powered agricultural pumps under the scheme of Kusum. So this becomes important for us. So all of this is something that you need to know about, and also a focus should be made to fast track the canal irrigation projects in the country. One criticism is made in vis-a-vis this irrigation project is that the government should not stress on more pumps. Under the solar powered pumps, again water is going to be drawn from the groundwater, and that again is facing some challenge. So this is something that the government should not focus on. Rather, focus should be on water conservation and not primarily focused on the groundwater, and micro irrigation should be practiced. So that is one important analysis which can be drawn here. Another thing that is important is with regards to the farmers' insurance. Now this is another cause of agricultural distress because the farmers are not well insured in the country. The scheme that is involved here is the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. So this is something that you need to know. Also, the National Agricultural Insurance Scheme is what is important. The focus of all these insurance schemes should be on increasing compensation, because at present present, the compensation is minimal, and as a result of it, the benefits is something that cannot be achieved. Also, the focus should be on timely advice on weather conditions to the farmer. Some technical help is what the farmers should be given under this particular scheme. So that is something that is important for us. Another analysis is with regards to the agricultural research and development. Now, as I've told you, populist measures often ignore the long-term benefits or the long-term schemes which the government should focus on, and one of them is agricultural research and development, which has taken a back seat because of lack of funds. Even the budget has not particularly spoken about this one scheme. And the editorial is discussing that there is a need to focus on more drought and pest resistant crops. There is also a need for focusing on technology for better irrigation. There is also a need to focus on the eastern and the rain-fed states and the crops that can be grown there. So definitely research and development is something that is warranted in the agriculture sector to do away with the agricultural distress, and that becomes important for us. Another thing which is very important for us is to know about the agricultural growth rate. Now, one thing that you need to know that why is this distress so pertinent now is because for the past 4 years, there has been a falling agricultural growth rate. Now, the Prime Minister's idea of doubling the farmer's income would require an agricultural growth rate of approximately 10.2%, and this is nowhere happening in India. At present, the agricultural growth rate varies between 4 to 5%, and this too is expected to fall further. So this is something that needs to be pushed or needs to be increased. So that is one important analysis, and for this to be realized, what is required is that some diversification to other crops is something that should be done, and that is one that will enable doing away with agricultural distress. So that is one analysis. Another thing which is very important is with regards to short-term measures versus long-term measures. Time and again, the criticism in the agriculture sector is that the focus of the government is on knee-jerk reaction. It largely focuses on short-term measures rather than focusing on the long-term measures, which should be largely about investments in irrigation, infrastructure, improving the extension services and institutions, and further making the marketing system very, very competitive in agriculture sector. So all of this, if it is done, it is only then that finally agriculture sector in India will become productive, it will become something gainful, and that is what is required rather than these knee-jerk short-term measures. So that becomes important for us. All of these points are something that are very important. It is largely an all-encompassing discussion on the issue of agricultural distress. So that is the relevance of this discussion. Now, coming to the next article, don't discount WaSH. Now, the context here is that the water, sanitation and hygiene trials in countries like Kenya and Bangladesh is what has been done. And in short, this is known as the WaSH trials. Now, as per these trials, a direct link between sanitation and stunting is something that could not be established. So there is one section, there is a group of people who are saying that the project of the government which is focusing on sanitation to do away with stunting is flawed, and the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is itself being questioned here. So that is the context. Now, coming to the issues, first and foremost, you need to understand that open defecation in our country is a major problem. Approximately 52% of the rural population is still resorting to open defecation in India. So even if these results are something that have not been proven, the problem of open defecation is something that cannot be denied, and India needs to still continue with the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So that is something that you need to know. Another thing is with regards to the relation between sanitation and stunting. Now here you need to understand that what is the relation? How is it that poor sanitation results in stunting? What happens is that whenever there is a poor sanitation, bacteria reach the children, and as a result of which they reach the stomach of these children and causes inflammation in their stomach lining. Once the stomach lining is inflamed, what happens is that there is a poor absorption of nutrients. And whenever there is a poor absorption of nutrients, it results in stunting of these children. And that is how the link is what is established. Now, this is a scientific theory, and the ground reality is something that has not been proven here. So that is something that becomes important for us. Another thing that you need to understand that if this link is something that has not been proved by the WaSH trials, then what is required is a wider perspective. Maybe stunting is something that is caused due to multiple factors, and sanitation may only be one factor which causes it. So those multiple factors should also be focused on. The multiple factors could be a poor health of the mother before her delivery, or for that matter, some other aspects of child growth and nutrition. So the government should take an all-encompassing approach rather than only focusing on sanitation to do away with stunting. And this becomes important for our analysis. Another thing is with regards to some limitations to the trials itself. Now, if these trials have not been able to establish that there is a link between sanitation and stunting, then it may be because there are some limitations to these trials itself. Now, these trials had limited budget primarily, as a result of which they could take place only for a small span of time, and they couldn't go on for a very long period of time, and as a result of which some direct results is what has not come. So that could be one limitation. The second limitation is that these trials have taken place in countries like Kenya and Bangladesh, who have already reduced open defecation, and as a result of which maybe some results is something that has not come. Also, maybe what is required is some more generations is what is required to be studied to get some final results in this regard. However, in case of India, it is something that is very clear, where it is seen that when you compare the rural children to the urban children, it is seen that stunting is less in urban children and it is more in rural children. This is largely because open defecation is something that is more in rural areas as compared to urban areas. So because of this reason, one could say that there have been limitations to trials, and these trials cannot be totally accepted blindly. So that's something that's important. Another analysis which is very important is with regards to a behavioral change. This I have time and again analyzed before also. The Swachh Bharat Abhiyan cannot be made successful by merely construction of toilets. What is required in this regard is that the government focuses on the behavioral changes which is required in the mindset of the people. That is something that needs to be focused upon to achieve true success of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So that is what is vital for us. Another thing which is going to be very, very important in this particular discussion is the case of Bangladesh. Now, you need to know that Bangladesh has made some major strides with regards to curbing open defecation. For example, at present, open defecation in Bangladesh is less than 1%. And this was something that was approximately 42% in the last decade. So there have been huge improvements which Bangladesh has made. So the case of Bangladesh becomes important for India. We have some lessons to learn from Bangladesh. First is that Bangladesh allocated a lot of funds for this project. Approximately 25% of the country's development budget was on curbing open defecation. So that is something that is important. Also in this country, it was a mission mode approach to change the attitudes of the people. The children were used as whistleblowers and agents of change. You can use these ideas that children were used as whistleblowers and agents of change. And a door-to-door campaign was what was done to achieve this success. So it is this what is required to be emulated in India itself. Even if these trials have failed, it cannot be denied that open defecation is a major challenge for the country. And in this light, what is required is that the government should not deter or it should not reduce its effort. Rather, it should only increase its effort. So that is something that is important in the analysis in this article. Now coming to the next article, the power of persuasion. Now time and again we are seeing that articles are coming on scientific temper. So that is the context of developing scientific temper in the country. This can be an important topic for the means of 2018. So that is something that you need to know. Some preparation in this regard is indeed going to be vital. Now coming to the background aspect, what you need to know that the term scientific temper was first time used in India by the first Prime Minister, Mr. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru himself. So that is something that you need to know. He had coined this term in his book, The Discovery of India. Now he described scientific temper as some quotes is what can be used in our answers. For example, he said scientific temper deals with appreciation of facts. Scientific temper deals with more critical faculty. It deals with weighing of evidence. It deals with questioning tradition and not following tradition just because it is tradition. And it can only be ensured if there is political and economic freedom. So this is something that becomes important. All of this has been written down in our discussion of the 17th of February. So if you're having some issues, so please you can go and watch that video. That has much more elaborate discussion on scientific temper. So that is something that you need to know. Now coming to the issues which have been highlighted in this particular editorial. The first issue is with regards to India's uniqueness. Now here you need to understand that indeed India is unique because India has called for scientific temper as a part of a fundamental duty under Article 51A of the Constitution, and no other country probably has done this. So that is something that becomes important with regards to India. The second issue is with regards to a continuity of superstitions. Now here the editorial discusses that it is being seen globally that whatever one might try to do, superstitions somehow survive. And as a result of which, the complete ending of superstition is something that cannot be envisaged. So that is one important analysis which has been given. The third issue is with regards to a theory of hypnosis. Now the editorial discusses that there could be several reasons because of which superstitions are being followed by people still. And he says that primarily this is because of a theory of hypnosis, where the beliefs of people have something that have been institutionalized and people are largely following them because they're in a hypnotic stage. They are fearful of a change, and as a result of which they want to avoid rationality in their thinking, and that becomes important for us. The analysis here, this is something that is important, that the beliefs is something that have been institutionalized, so that is important. Another thing that has been analyzed is with regards to the ill effects of superstition. Now, definitely superstition has some ill effects, and something, if you have to give an example, you could give an example that sometimes medical advice is ignored by people primarily because of superstition. For example, even mental illness in India is still considered a taboo. Even if a person is suffering from a genuine mental illness, he avoids going to a psychiatrist or a doctor from the fear of a superstition that probably he's been, occupied by some spirit or something like that. So these kind of superstition is something that continue in our society. So that is something that is important. Another analysis which has been made is with regards to disagreements in science. Now here the author says that even if science is something that is followed, then there are disagreements in science, but this does not mean that the scientific fraternity goes into advocating superstition. So it is this spirit which should be inculcated in the citizen. So that is something that has been advocated. Another thing that has been advocated is with regards to persuasion as a tool. Now how can superstitions be done away with is analyzed, and that the author says can only be done away with slow persuasion. No law in this regard can ever help, because citizens, until and unless they are themselves convinced with regards to doing away with a particular superstition, they will not give up a superstition, and that is something that becomes important. Some present issues is something that becomes important, because this entire context is that this article is time and again coming is because of some present scenarios in India. It is seen that scientific temper is something that is not being advocated by the leaders themselves. We had seen that in the 100th Science Congress, it was the Prime Minister himself who talked about mythology of India, where it was said that India already had nuclear weapons in the form of the Brahmastra. Such kind of talk is something that was hugely criticized. So that is something that is important. Recently, there have been leaders in the parliament who have said that cigarette smoking does not cause cancer. Also, challenges have been made to the Darwin's theory. So such kind of present issues is something that is making this idea of scientific temper important. So a question can be expected from this area. Once again, I'm saying, if you want to go deeper into this topic, you can go and watch this video. So that's about this topic. Coming to the next topic, Z Unlimited. So the context is that the Communist Party of China has proposed to abolish the term limits on presidency. And as a result of these abolishment of term limits, now President Xi Jinping of China can go well into beyond 2020, go into ruling China beyond 2023. So that is something that is important for us to know. Now, one thing that is important is that already till 2023, President Xi Jinping was supposed to be in office. Now, beyond 2023 also, there is a possibility that he is going to continue as the president. Now, what are the issues related to this is that first and foremost is that President Xi Jinping of China has emerged indeed as a strong leader in China. It is being said that his popularity is only next to Mao himself, and as a result of which he is a leader to stay. So that is something that you need to know. Another issue is with regards to concentration of power. Now, China is often known for not having democracy, but the issue is that if one leader is emerging as a very strong leader, then it results in a concentration of power with a single individual, and this is something that is never in the interest of the region entirely. Because if it is President Xi Jinping who has a particular opinion against India, for instance, then in that case, that opinion is something that will become very difficult to counter. So this balancing of power is something that is always in the interest of foreign policy, and if it is concentrated with a single strong leader, it becomes extremely difficult. So that is one analysis which becomes important for India. Another thing is that President Xi Jinping is known for following an assertive foreign policy, and this is something that is important. He is the engineer for initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, and also we are seeing that he is ambitiously intervening in entire South Asia and in several other countries surrounding India. The string of pearls policy is something that is a credited to President Xi Jinping. So if he continues beyond 2023, questions are being raised about the foreign policy that he's going to in future follow. So that is something that becomes important for our analysis. Another important aspect is with regards to a clash between the personality cult versus collective leadership. Now, China has generally had the philosophy of collective leadership, but this is something that is definitely being defeated, and now the focus is largely on the personality cult which is developing under President Xi Jinping. So that becomes important here. Another thing is with regards to an internal power struggle. It is being feared that because of the sudden rise of the President Xi Jinping himself, it might result in some internal power struggles within the Communist Party of China, which might not be good for the stability of China. So that is something that is important. Indeed, the topic is not very important for us, only vis-a-vis India-China relations. Somewhere you can have scope to discuss this particular analysis. So that is why I've included this topic. So that is also the relevance. Now, based on today's discussions, please try and attempt these questions within a word limit of 150 words. So with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow.